Hi, grade 7s. Today what we're going to do is we're going to keep rolling with our percents, and today what we're going to do is we're going to calculate percent problems, but we're going to use a method called proportions. So just a reminder, a proportion is basically two ratios or two fractions separated by an equal sign. So we're going to have one on this side and we're going to have one on this side. Typically, one of our fractions is going to simply be the numbers we learned from the percent. So let's give this a try and see if we can make sense of this. So our first question says 40% of students are boys. 10 students in the class are boys. So how many students are in the class? So the first thing I want to do is I want to build my proportion. So we have a fraction on one side, fraction on the other. The first fraction comes from our percent. So remember, percent means out of 100. So if we had 100 students in the class, 40 of them would be boys. I'm just going to write a B here to remind of that the top line is referring to the boys in the class, and then I'm going to just write all on the bottom to just remind me that the bottom is all the students. So boys are on the top, all the students are on the bottom. Now on the other side of the equal sign, we don't actually have 40 boys in the class out of 100 students. We actually have much less. We only have 10 boys in this class. So on the top, because the top represents boys, we actually only have 10 boys. So the question is, how many students would be in the class if we only have 10 boys? Now this would be a situation where I would say it's pretty straightforward. Just a reminder, if this is an equivalent fraction, okay, what I do to the top, I do to the bottom should give me the result. So in this case, 40 times what gives me 10, or 40 divided by what gives me 10. And you can see here, if I divide the top by 4, 40 divided by 4, that gives me 10. On the bottom here, 100 divided by 4, because I found out this is divided by 4, so the bottom I need to do the same in my proportion. 100 divided by 4 tells me that the question mark here is equal to 25. So if I have 10 boys in the class, that means there are 25 students in this class. Okay? So this is one way of us solving problems with percents with proportions. I'm going to show you a second question here. This is a pretty common question. You're going out for supper with your family. Let's say your family spends $80 on supper. Typically, you go to a restaurant, if it's a sit-down meal, you give the waitress or waiter a tip. 15% would be kind of normal. So the question is, how much would the tip be? So this is how we do it. We're going to build our ratio. Okay. The first thing is, let's deal with the percent first. So that means I'll give the waiter or waitress $15 out of every 100. Because reminder, percent means out of 100. So if I spend 100, I'll give them 15 tip. So if I spend 100, I will give a tip of $15. That's what that means. On the other side, though, we actually didn't spend 100. We actually only spent 80. So I'm going to put 80 on the bottom because that's how much I'm spending. The question is, how much of a tip should I give? So I'm going to put an X, or I could put a question mark or a smiley face or a dollar sign, something. I need to have some sort of variable there to help me solve this. Now, here is two different ways for us to solve it. I'm going to let you pick which way you like best. So the first way, we have 15 over 100 equals some amount over 80. So one way that we could actually do this is by first asking ourselves, let's write 15 over 100 as a simpler fraction. Sometimes if we can simplify this and make it a simpler fraction, it'll make life easier. So I can see right away here that I can divide 15 by 5 and 100 by 5. So I can write this as a simplified fraction. 15 divided by 5 is 3. 100 divided by 5 is 20. Now look at this. Now 15 over 100 is the same as 3 over 20. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my original question, and instead of writing 15 over 100, I'm going to write 3 over 20. And it's equal to x over 80. Now, you can see here what times are divided by gives me 80. So 20 times what, or 20 divided by what, gives me 80. You can see if I multiply it by 4, I get that. Now on the top side here, I need to multiply by the same number. 3 times 4 is 12. So therefore, our tip is going to be $12. That's one way. So what was that method? First thing is simplify, if possible, the percent, and that might make it easier for you to do it, because you can see what number, 100 times what number gives me 80? It's not really clear. Okay. So the second way you could do this is actually work it out a little bit different way. So it's actually figuring out what times, what number, 100 times what number gives us 80. Because what I'll do is I'll multiply the top one by the same. Well, how do I figure that out? Well, all you do is take the number 80 and just divide it by 100. When you do that, that gives you 0.8. So you can see here, what number, 100 times what number gives me 80? The answer is, it's just 0.8. Just do it backwards. 80 divided by 100 gives us 0.8. So 100 times 0.8 gives me 80. So you can see the number I'm going to multiply up top here is just going to be 0.8. So therefore, 15 times 0.8 gives me, let me just pull out my calculator, gives me 12. So my tip amount here, the x value, is just equal to 12, so I'm going to have a $12 tip. There is two different ways for kind of tackling this same problem.